Here's a story. You're born into a sex cult where your mother drugs and forces you to be raped by her husband since the age of 4. At 12 years old, you get pregnant. But who could bring a pregnant child to the hospital and not be questioned? So your mother delivers the child at home, and then you never see your daughter again. 18 years later, you tell the world what happened. Your family calls you a liar, but the OBGYN and lie detector tests tell a different story. Are you mentally ill, or has everyone in your family failed you? Trappin Anonymous.
The same way she held my hands when we were in the room, that's the same way she held my hands when she made me do that. And he asked her, can I ejaculate in her mouth? And she said, oh, we're not going that far. And I'll never forget that moment. It was very devastating for me.
What's good? My name is Chris Styles. It's Trappin Anonymous. Welcome back. Welcome back. Shout out to everybody that's helping keeping the movement moving. Shout out to Lux Legacy for this one-of-one hoodie. I'm loving it. Trappin Anonymous everywhere. Shout out to the merch team. You know, I can't be more grateful for everybody that pours into our community. And if you have a story out there, please, contact me, hit me in the DMs. I do reply, I do answer my emails. That's how we get all of our guests. So if you're just sitting there wondering, I don't know if I should hit him up or, hit me up. I got you. These stories that we're getting out to the community, I feel like they are just, it's so important. It's so important. I can't put a amount on it. The story that we have today, it took a while to get here, but I'm extremely happy. I'm extremely grateful. And do remember the stories that you hear, they reflect real life. They're here to educate, they're here to inform, and hopefully keep your little homie off the streets. My name is Chris Styles. This is Trappin Anonymous. Let's get it. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. So I just want to start with your name and why you think your story is important.
Well, my name is Taja Simone, and I think my story is important because it gives other women a voice, it spreads awareness, and I think it opens eyes to what really goes on in the world sometimes when it comes to just girls that are not protected and what that really means,
Okay, so you were born into a sex cult.
Correct.
What were some of the things that you experienced there?
Molestation, rape. I had my daughter at 12. Verbal abuse, mental abuse, just everything under the sun.
What was one of the more traumatic things that you experienced in that house?
Where I had my child, or just from the beginning?
I guess from the beginning.
From the beginning. I think the most horrific memory that I have, we lived in this apartment complex in Muskegon, Michigan called Arbor Crossing Apartments. And I remember that is where I was brutally beaten. And I think that was a moment for me when I knew that I was kind of alone. And I knew, even though I had an older sister, that we were alone. And I'll never forget the morning when I woke up after being brutally beaten. It was it's a feeling I wouldn't want any little girl to feel.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And who beat you?
My mother's husband.
Why?
Because me and my sister were in our room. My mother called us in a room. My sister has always been a little bit more chill and go with the flow. So the whole point of calling us in the room was to coach us to so we wouldn't tell. He didn't feel confident with me. He felt confident with my sister. So he decided to use force, and it was supposed to be a knockout one punch, but he couldn't. I'm not going to say he couldn't do it because, of course, he had the strength, but I'm not sure. I guess he just decided to beating me was better. And yeah. Oh, and then during that time, my mom was there. My mom was sitting in the bed with me. Her legs was crisscross applesauce, so my legs were kind of in between hers, and she held my arms down, and she She allowed him to do that.
Punch you in the face.
Punched me multiple times, multiple times, multiple times.
Okay. And what was some of the sexual abuse like? What would they make you? What would they have you do? Was it just you? Was it your sister?
It was both, but it was different men who abused us. So I can't just say it was all one person. But as far as my mother's now husband, then boyfriend, he would make us perform, will make me perform fellatio. I remember, and I think that's one of the biggest memories. I remember being in my room and he wanted me to do that. My mom is there and I never wanted to do any of it. So I would always like move it out of my way with my hands. So the same way she held my hands when we were in the room, that's the same way she held my hands when she made me do that. And he asked her, can I ejaculate in her mouth? And she said, oh, we're not going that far. And I'll never forget that moment. It was very devastating for me.
Your mother being present while this is going on and watching and participating. I can't even imagine, like, how old are you at this time?
I was in first grade.
6 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And this was sort of your introduction into that lifestyle?
Yes. I would say for the most part, because like I said, like we spoke about before, it's not just kids, it's all the women, it's a cult. So me experience, so like my mom, my grandmother, my aunts, they all share my grandfather because all the women in the family belong to the man. So I did grow up like, knowing that was going on, and also just seeing my aunt and my mom argue over my grandfather, seeing what my grandmother went through, knowing that was their situation, that was our situation. So I kind of knew a little bit, but I didn't, as far as sexually, yes, that was my first introduction sexually to any type of.
How often would this go
on? Well, in that apartment, it went on a lot for me. To the point that I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep because I never knew when one of them was going to come in my room to touch me. So I was always tired. But it was almost, I would say out of a week, I would say 3 or 4 times a week.
Until you're about how old?
Until I was in middle school, because that's when I got pregnant.
Okay. So I'm assuming it started off with oral. When did it become like full on penetration?
So, and that's where the propofol and the chloroform comes in at, because when I was...
Can you explain to us what that is first?
Yes. So chloroform is for people who've ever seen the movie Taken or know anything about sex trafficking, it's a sex trafficking drug. So it's almost like getting a Mickey in your drink. It goes in your system and you wake up and you're just like, what's going on? I don't know where I am. But when I was a kid, it didn't start off that way because, of course, you don't want to give a kid chloroform. So it was muscle relaxers, but it was in the form of chocolate. So she would say, do you guys want candy? And then of course you're like, oh, my mom's giving me chocolate. You're eating it. And to the point when he comes in, now you can't move because your muscles are so relaxed and you've eaten so many and you're only so big. Now you're fighting to try to move around to save yourself. So
you would eat the candy and then he would penetrate you?
Of course. Mm-hmm.
And what age was this?
That was the same apartment, first grade, but when he did it the first time, he didn't my mom took a whole bottle of lube and put it on my vaginal area. And I was crying to her, and she was telling me, like, I know you don't feel it. I put the whole bottle. I know you don't feel it. And he put the tip in and was like, you know, going in and out for a second. And then he just, I'm not going to say he did an impact really hard, but I will say he stuck more of that, of his penis in me. And I remember kind of just being out of it. Like, I don't know. I remember how my body felt. My body literally felt like no. And that's the only way I can describe it. It felt like whatever. At the time, I really didn't understand. I understood it was wrong and that we're not supposed to be touching. But my body knew that it was like God was with me. It was like something was just with me, telling me, like, whatever's going on, this is not supposed to be. And I remember feeling just completely devastated. And I remember when he did stick more in, and I my body was just like a gas. And I remember my mom just breaking down crying. And I still to this day don't really understand that, because, like, why are you doing it then, you know? But
Yeah, I mean, your mother, I don't know if she's doing this for her own pleasure or if she's doing this because it's the man's pleasure. You know, it's kind of hard to decipher
well,
like.
I can kind of explain that a little bit. So to be fair, so my real father died when I was 8 months. He drowned in Lake Michigan, and my mom did try in the beginning. I'm not going to take that from her. But when she met him, he didn't have kids, and he didn't want a woman with kids. So I think because maybe she felt alone, that she decided to choose love. But now that I'm an adult, even if you were devastated, my father and my children has passed away, I'm depressed. I have 2 kids, 18 months apart. I'm going through a lot. In 2025, you're still laying next to that person. So even if it was a point in her motherly self to say, you know, I want forgiveness, or I want to have a relationship with my daughters, I know that she's still not willing to give that up. But still, me being a 30-year-old woman, not understanding why you don't realize that that's not love, you know?
I was watching your story and
Yeah.
reading up on it and even talking to you. I mean, you told me that there was one point in time where she literally put your face in his ass.
Oh yes, absolutely. So that was in Arbor Crossing Apartments. And I remember it being dark at first. Well, the room was dark, the TV was on. And I was screaming and crying. And it smelled, and I'm just being honest with you, it smelled horrible. And she told him to get up and go clean himself up just so I can do it. And after she was done, because it wasn't like I'm a kid. It's not like I knew what to do. They just pushed me on the floor, and I cried, and I fell asleep on the floor that night.
I just can't imagine what life was like for you.
You know, God was with me. I prayed a lot. My grandmother, my dad's mom, and my mom's mom, I gotta be fair, they both taught me how to pray. And I always knew, like, my dad's mom always taught me about my dad, and, you know, I always asked a lot of questions about my father. So honestly, at 7 years old, I'm praying and I'm talking to my dad, you know. And I know that sounds crazy, but because of what I was going through, I was very mature. And so I just was hoping in my imaginary world that my dad was somewhere around helping me in some way. Yeah.
How do you know that your mother was drugging you with these drugs?
Well, first off, when we were in Arbor Crossing, because the more you do something, because, like, she gave us a candy, but once I knew how it made me feel, when she would ask, I would say no. So that is when the propofol. Now you ask, how does one get this drug? How do you get this drug? Well, first of all, we're part of a cult, and secondly, she works in a mental health hospital. So she is stealing sedative drugs and bringing them home.
How do you know?
Because I seen it. Propofol comes in a pill form. It's a white, small little pill, a tablet, and it also comes. And then the chloroform is it was liquid, so you can put it on a towel. Now that's how, like, or a cloth. Now that's how I got pregnant, because at middle school you're not coming in my room and raping me because I'm fighting for my life. So he would come in my room while I'm sleeping, put that under my nose, that puts you into deeper sleep, and then you're not getting up. So, how I found out, I knew when I would wake up, I would feel a little weird, but I'm just like, whatever. But one day I woke up and I could blurrily see them. And I remember me kind of coming to, and they was like, oh, she's waking up. They ran out, but my underwear were down and there was a substance on me. At the time, I didn't know what the substance was. So I went to my grandmother and my aunt, and I'm telling them like, hey, I was asleep. Da, da. And so my aunt told me, my aunt told my grandmother, you know exactly what's going on. They're going in her room and doing the same thing that y'all did to us. And my grandmother looked at her and said, I don't know anything. And just little things like that. Like down the line, I knew certain things that happened, but no one ever just came to me directly and said, hey, we're having sex with your granddad. Hey, but as far as detailed, I've seen the fights and the arguments. I knew what was happening, but I didn't know it wasn't like he did this, and this to me, because the whole point is Stockholm syndrome. He wants, the whole point of the cult is for the woman to love you, to trust only you. So it's a brainwashing thing. So in order for that to happen, I use the other women to coach the younger women. So by the time they get to me, they know all the ins and outs. They know how, my family didn't do this in a typical way. So some kids, you go to school and you see them with, doesn't look like anyone brushed their teeth or, gave them a bath or anything. That wasn't my case. I was the kid that came to school well put together, but had the fucked up story.
Got you.
Yeah.
And the same aunt you said was a participant.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What were some things that she participated in?
So she would do it in a way, because she's the youngest sister. So she would do it in a way like, let's go play a game. And so that's the first time. Me and my sister. And she told my sister, oh, it's only me and Tasia can play the game. And so my sister looked real sad, and she sat down and she said, why I can't play the game, TT Nisha? She went in the room, shut the door, and took my face and took me by my hair, both sides of my head, and like mushed my face in her vagina.
Was this something she was regularly doing?
I would say she had to do it at least 4 or 5 times. The first time I didn't understand what was happening to me, but then the second time really not know, because you don't know what's happening. So you go, and then this is the thing. Once that happens, you go back to regular life. It's not like, so you're thinking, everything's fine until she does it again. But the third time I told her I didn't want to play the game. I don't want to play. I don't want to go, because I didn't like I didn't like the feeling of it. And I remember telling her I can't breathe. And she told me she didn't want me to breathe.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a family thing.
Mm-hmm.
So this had to have happened to your mom and your aunt.
Of course.
By their mother and father?
Of course. I remember my mom and my aunt, like, I think as I grew older, they started to feel guilty just because of the person that God made me, and they're wondering, how is she so different? Why is she not conforming? Because I'm the only one that really got abused as much, because I was the fighter. I was the one that's saying no,
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
And you told me that your mom and dad were sleeping with, I mean, your mom and your aunt was sleeping with their father, your grandfather, and you remember them fighting over him.
Yes, I remember. Well, the first thing I remember is my grandmother. I remember my grandmother, me, my mom, my sister, and my aunt were in the kitchen. We were having a conversation. My grandfather raped my oldest sister first. And I remember it being this big deal because my older sister is the first grandchild on both sides of our family. So it was a big deal because she was the first one to get touched outside of his kids. And I remember the word rape, rape, rape. And I was a kid. I looked up to my older sister. I always wanted to be like her, do everything like her. So I'm like, I want to get raped too. You know, not even knowing what the word mean, what we're even talking about. So my aunt is crying at the table, and she's saying that, mind you, my dad is passed. So she's saying, hey, you know, let's just blame this on the other side of the family because my dad can't go to jail. Right. So my grandmother is worried because my dad's mom, because my dad is not there, is very, very active. And she works in shelters and deals with battered women. So her seeing trauma would have been spot on. She would have seen it right away. So my grandmother said, like, you know, you are acting as if this is your man, is what she said verbatim. And she told her that it was. So he came downstairs and my aunt was crying and screaming. And she said, because they have two homes. The home that we were standing in, he had just purchased a few years ago. And she told my grandmother that, little do you know, he bought this house for me and you need to choose. And he kicked me, my sister, my mom out the house that day. And him and my aunt stayed in the house together. And I've never seen it with my two eyes, but I've definitely heard them have sex. And, you know, even when she got married, her and her husband didn't go off and get their own house. They stayed and lived their whole marriage in one house with all of their kids. They had their kids there. So it's almost like she got married, but she was also still dealing with her father, which is why she is still living in that same house right now. Never left.
12 years old, you have a kid.
Yes.
Where do you give birth?
I gave birth on 1956 Hudson Street in Muskegon, Michigan.
How?
So how that happened was, I remember my older sister started her period, and I remember my mom talking under her clothes, my stepdad. They thought it was funny. It was almost like it was a shameful thing. So when I started mine in 5th grade, in Miss Dorothy's class, I said, I'm not going home and saying anything because I don't want to go through that. But I was a child that observed a lot. So I watched what my sister and my mom did when they had their period. So that's what I did. And but she never knew. Until one day she's looking at me and she's like, you look pregnant. And she was like, here, go in the bathroom, pee on this. And lo and behold, I was pregnant.
Who said that?
My mom. But I was 12, I was very tiny, and there was no teacher out looking for a 12-year-old to be pregnant, especially during that time. Maybe more so now, but back then, no. So every morning she would get up, wrap around my stomach. And I remember laying in the bed, and I had major, major, major pain. Like, it wasn't just in my stomach, it was a full body pain. And I remember my mom calling a few people. Well, the whole time she's trying to figure out how to get rid of the baby, because you can't take a 12-year-old to the abortion clinic. You can't take it to the hospital. They're going to call CPS. So my aunt comes. My best friend brother comes. And my mom's best friend comes. And I remember her telling me to push. And I remember sweating so bad. Like, it felt like I was like laying in a pool of water. And I feel like mind you, no medication. I'm feeling like I'm about to pass completely out. And I remember my mom having my daughter in her hands, and she looked at her friend. Whatever she planned on doing to the child, she said, She was crying and she said, I can't do it. I can't do it. And she was just saying, she did say my daughter was beautiful. And I remember like having her mate so blurry. I would say, because I don't have the exact time frame, I would say maybe like a few months, maybe a month or two. And one day, and my mom would sleep with me, so it'd be me, the baby in the middle, and then my mom on the other side. And at that moment, I kind of felt like maybe my child was helping her turn a leaf, because I could feel that she wanted to protect at least my baby. But one day I woke up and she was gone. And so imagine being 12, going through puberty, going through postpartum, and then someone saying, there is no baby. What do you mean? Like, it was an extremely hard time, because it was almost like we have to play on your mind for this to go away. And when you're 12 and you're going through all of these different hormonal things, it's easy to do.
Okay. How long would you say you were pregnant for?
Well, it had to have been 9 months for me to push her out. So I would say 9 months.
So you carried full term, coming to school, coming back home, wrapping saran wrap around your stomach for 9 months. And then your mother giving birth to your child.
And if it's not the full 9 months, that would be something she would have to confirm. But I mean, I'm only going off of what I remember.
Right. And it's even the fact that, cut the umbilical cord, push out the placenta, just like real midwife sort of level of experience that she would have had to conduct a pregnancy, right?
Right. So my mom was going to school to be a nurse at the time. So even when we were at the first apartment, she was in school. So my mom knew a lot about all of that type of stuff. And also she knew that she couldn't take me to the doctor. She couldn't take me to get an abortion. So she had been looking stuff up and like preparing for this. It was like, oh, we got to push this baby. Deliver this baby. She prepared for it.
And this was your stepfather's child.
Yes.
And you remember her loving the child, and then one day the child is gone. Do you say anything? Do you speak to her?
Of course. I can't even, if she loved the child, I would still have the child. But I think that she had a sense of some sort of protection, some sort of, maybe God was trying to give her some love in her heart for the situation. I think she was feeling that. But my mom didn't want the 4 kids that she has. So there's no way that, and my mom's husband wanted her daughter. So there's no way that baby was going to be raised in that house. Now, looking back, I know how my mom is. She wouldn't have wanted the baby raised. So maybe she did have a love for the child,
right.
But to actually keep it, I think she had probably known in her mind that she was giving that baby up.
Do you think the child is alive right now?
I think there's a strong possibility. I think it's maybe like a 85% chance for sure, based on some certain findings.
Okay. And after that, the abuse stops. They're probably like, we're not gonna touch Tasia anymore. This is going too far.
So that scared a lot of people. I feel it calmed things down. And I can't say that the abuse stopped, because it was still like verbal and like separation. Like the main thing that my stepfather wanted is to create a separation. He did not want it to be, he wanted it to be my mom, his 2 kids, and him, and he would make sure that happens, because he wouldn't want, like if they're watching a movie, they would tell us to go upstairs. They didn't want us around. And he basically told her, like, I told you this when I got with you. You accepted the fact that I didn't want to mess with your kids like that. So
this is a lot. This is a lot. No one believes you. Nobody believes you. They hear your story. They hear what happened. And everyone says, you're out of your mind.
Correct. Well, my family members. The only people that thinks I'm out of my mind are them. When I talk to anyone else about it, it's not, especially today, something that's so unheard of. And knowing how I value family, I value, me and my mom have our ups and downs, but I value that. I value my grandmother, my cousins, everybody. So I would never jeopardize that for a little attention so I think that people know that about me. Like, I really genuinely love my family. I would never try to tear my family down, as my grandfather would say, for no reason.
Right. Right. You take a lie detector test.
Absolutely.
By a prominent specialist.
Absolutely. He was on Dr. Phil.
Do you remember his name?
His name is Howard Swabash.
And can you talk to us about that lie detector test?
Yes. So I called him first, told him my story. And he had been a detector for years. He has a resume that is out of this world, but he was like, Tasia, before you even take this test, I'm gonna tell you that I believe you, and that I think that your grandmother is trying to protect your mom based on the things that I was saying. So I get there, and when you first get there, they ask you questions that are true. What's your name? Things like that. It's a whole process. You don't just go in and answer questions. But I took 2 tests. Both tests were 8 questions, and I passed with flying colors. About me having my child, about being drugged, about everything that we just discussed. And when I brought that to my family, they said, hey, it wasn't us, it was the other side of the family. So it went from being no to it wasn't us. And I think that from the conversations that you've had with my aunt, with my mother, that I think they're still on that same path of it wasn't me, or pointing the other finger.
You then go to the OBGYN.
Yes.
What do you find there?
So I went to the OBGYN, and she did an exam. I told her the situation first, and then she did an exam, and she said, without a shadow of a doubt, there's something that's horrible that happened to you. I have, we did put it's kind of like a camera that goes in there, and you can see there's a bunch of scar tissue. And she also let me know I needed to do a FSG pregnancy test, and that is to determine if I can even have kids because of the damage that she sees in my vagina. So once that happens, I'm calling my dad's mom, my grandmother, I call my aunt. I'm shaking because, I love children. I want to be a mom one day. And she's like, Tasia, I don't think you should drive. I think you should, just sit there for a second, calm down. My phone dies. So my grandmother calls 911 to the hospital because she's like, I want to make sure that my granddaughter's okay. So they get there. I get in the police car. They take me to the hospital. I calm down, go home. But just the fact that I may not be able to have kids, all of this stuff is going on, I'm overwhelmed. So I'm constantly having panic attacks, constantly just having anxiety attacks. That leads me in the hospital at least 3 more. After that first time, 2 more times.
And this is a mental hospital?
No, this is just regular hospital. So the 3rd time, they're like, all the things that you're telling us is not that we don't believe you, but with all of that trauma, we really want you to get evaluated. How are you navigating with all of this that you're saying? They told me just an evaluation. Now, when I got there, they wanted me to stay. The reason I had to stay is because I got there around 4:30. The doctors leave at 5. So I went to a room. Pretty much nothing in that room, but a bed, another person. She's taking my shoestrings out of my shoes, my hair ties out of my hair, and I'm asking her, do I have to stay here? And she's like, yeah, you do, until you can talk to someone. And I'm just looking around at my surroundings, And I'm thinking, how did a girl who gets beaten, raped, abused, and she tells her what happened to her, and I end up here? That's what I thought initially. But the way God works, sometimes He does things in sequence, and He does it for a reason. And I knew that people were going to say, hey, Tasia, I don't know or not believe me. But God said, Tasia, I had to put you in a place where people don't have a sound mind to show you that you do have a sound mind. I gave you a sound mind. But the fact that people calling you crazy, I'm going to put you in a place where people may be a little bit off so I can show you that you're okay. And I think when I got there, that's how they felt, because the doctor, the nurse, the receptionist, they're like, why are you here? He said, Tasia, I think you may need some outpatient therapy for what you've gone through, but to be locked up in an institution, absolutely not. I'm still working. I'm about to graduate in about 2 months. So I'm like still trying to push homework out and do good while this is on my brain. And it was just a lot going on.
Tasia, you're very articulate. You're very bright. You're in TSU. Speaking to you, I could never guess anything is wrong with you. I could never say something's off, right? I spoke to your private investigator. You hired a private investigator.
Absolutely.
To track down your daughter.
Yes.
Speaking to him, he tells me your story checks out. He says, what you said happened. He said he found your daughter. He said that your daughter was in the custody of 2 pedophiles. One is still in jail, and the other one is a free man. He says your daughter is, I believe, in Michigan.
She's in Detroit, Michigan.
She's in Detroit. He said everything checks out. I've searched the rabbit hole of the story. Do you want to speak a little bit about the private investigator, the process, how you found him?
Yes, of course. So my father passed when I was 8 months. His dad passed when I was 15. And every other man on that paper that could or should have protected me did not. So I'm thinking to myself, where do I go? Because I know I'm a woman. I can't. And I'm standing alone. And I'm one of 4 all women, So, and I look at myself as the protector of my sisters in a way. It's just a part of who I am. And when I see him come out first I saw him on the internet. And he has a slogan and it says, protect women and children. That instantly caught my eye. And then I'm listening to some of his stories, his retrievals, his resume, and I'm like, okay, I need to get in contact with him. At the time, he's viral on the internet. He's everywhere. So in my mind, he's not going to respond to me because everyone's probably trying to get in contact with him. Well, he did respond. And from there, we had like really intense conversations, asked me a lot of questions, and sent him over everything he asked me for. And then he started to let me know, hey, I found your daughter. She's in Detroit. He started asking me, I don't want to get into too much detail, but he started asking me, he started letting me know she was a part of a satanic church, just to give me an idea of what we're dealing with. So it's not like at this point we can just go in a house and grab her. It's going to be an extensive process to that. So that's kind of where we are right now.
Okay. Has he provided you with any documentation, any proof, anything?
Well, what's interesting is that some things he doesn't tell me just because he knows I'm very emotional. And I think from our first conversation that we both know that it's something that hits home for me. So even with the information that you have with like the 2 men and like her having 2 fathers, and I just found out about that last night. So I think it's because I know that she's in Detroit. That was enough at the time because I was ready to get on the plane and go get my baby. Like, just give me the address. He was like, Tasia, you can't, it doesn't work like that.
Right.
You're going to go to jail if you go to someone's house and just say, hey, this is my daughter.
Right.
So I was just going to say, I wanted to add too, because this is a misconception and I really want to get this out there. You said that it doesn't look like not that I've gone through what I've gone through. There is a such thing, and I want teachers and anyone who works with kids, just because a kid comes to school and their hair is pretty and their mom puts them on nice clothes, everyone is not a stupid criminal. And, you know, so people know if she looks good, the teacher's not going to be looking at her as much as she's looking at the person over here that mom is on drugs and they're barely, you know, have their shoes tied when they come to school. I say pay attention to behavior. Don't just look at the mom and look at what things, everything is not what it seems, you know. And as I sit here and you say that, I'm still in pain about these things. But I still, I want young women to know, like, through me pushing, I'm still healing and I'm still fighting. Like, just because you go through things and just because bad things happen to you, you can still rise. And even in your hard days, you know, I graduated after all of that. And I think what was hard for me was that a part of me wasn't just doing it for me. And the people that I was doing it for was not there. And I guess that did hurt me a little bit. But I was doing it for my family. You know, very family oriented, just for, so now that when I did get my degree, it was like, wow, I wanted to make my family proud. But now this second time is for me. And, you know, so if you're going through something like I was going through something, I got accepted into every school I applied to. I'm at HBCU, Texas Southern University. And I'm prospering, even though it's hard. So whatever you go through in life, just because you look good doesn't mean it is good. And just because you look bad doesn't mean it is bad. You know, I just want to put that out there.
Yeah, and I apologize if I offended you with that.
Oh no, you did not offend me. It's hard to offend me with this because I prepared myself for questions, for people's judgment, you know. And when you know your truth and you live in your truth, you know, it is what it is.
Thank you for that. You offer your mother a lie detector test.
Yes, well, I want to touch on that. My stepfather's in the military. The military flew out to Michigan, did a full interview, and then I took the lie detector test. So she had my interview, the lie detector test. The military offered him his job, a test, and the Allegra, which is the detective for the military, she told me that they both declined, and she said that she could not force them to take one. But in my mind, I'm thinking, if my daughter came to me and said, Mom, you know, your husband did this to me, or I have these memories, I would do anything to prove to my child that I'm your protector. I'm your mom. I love you. I would never hurt you. So the fact that my mom declined, it spoke volumes.
I mean, because even if I know I did nothing, if my child comes to me and I know that this will put this whole thing to rest, I would just take the test.
You would think.
I would just take the test. In the perfect world, you find your daughter tomorrow. She comes, she sees you. Are you in a position to take care of her mentally, financially, emotionally? Are you in a place to even welcome her into your life and take care of a child?
I feel like you're never really prepared for that until they get here, until you see them, you know. I feel like, if I'm being honest, answering that question, I'm not in a position that I would want to be in to have a child. But am I in a position to work and to sacrifice to take care of her or help her the way she needs to? Right now, absolutely. I would do anything to make sure she's okay. And if she ever watches this, I want her to know that even if I found my daughter and she said, Mom, thank you for finding me, or for showing me that you care, but I'm okay. You know, I'm not gonna force, because I know what that feels like, but I want her to know I care. I know what it feels like to not feel like you have anyone, and I never want her to feel that way.
How lonely has it been?
I would say extremely, because like I told you before, very family oriented. So I love being around love, family, a good vibe. And anytime you spend too much time alone, it's not good. Because solitary confinement is a state of mind. You could be in your room and not move and not go anywhere and feel like you're in solitary confinement. So when I first moved to Texas and got settled into TSU, it was a lot, because they closed the case in Michigan, moved to Texas, started school, and it was just like I was starting a new chapter, but I was still kind of, the residual of that was still on me. And where was I going with this? I'm sorry. My mind was.
How lonely has it been?
Oh, how lonely. So in the beginning, it was just fast paced. And I think I had a lot of time to think, because I didn't fly. I drove 22 hours to get to Texas. And when I got there, I feel like everything was moving fast. Now I feel
In
like
a U-Haul.
in a U-Haul by myself, because I didn't have enough money to fly, and I really wanted to get to school. I told myself and it was really, again, for me and my child, I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, first of all, I want to get to school. Secondly, I got to get away from these people. I don't even want to live in Michigan anymore. I don't want to be around them. I don't want any of that. And I kind of just wanted a fresh start.
And was this right after you go to the hospital and all of this stuff is happening?
I would say maybe like 5 or 6 months later.
But the residual from that, you felt it, and you had to kind of get out of there?
Well, up until I got here, I was still talking to detectives. I was still, like, the military, when they interviewed me, it was very intense. And they did a lot of digging. So they found CPS cases. They found a lot of different things. And so when you are constantly talking to people, investigators, private investigators, you're constantly talking about it. So it's not like I ever get a chance to not be in it, because I'm always like emailing or trying to help myself, or looking in Detroit to see if I can find any churches that are saying, all different types of things. So it's never really like a calm moment when it comes to it, even now, because look what we're doing now.
Right. So we was talking about you driving down, you getting there, you finally settling in, and just the whirlwind of emotions that you must have been feeling, and this, that, and the third. This happened. This is 2 years ago. We're talking about, you're 30 now, so we're talking about maybe 2 years.
No, it's been like a year.
A year. Mm-hmm. And all of your life this happens, but now all of this stuff is coming to a head.
So 2023, I had an overlapse in my lease. I moved out of my apartment in, I would say, June. Went home to my grandparents' house for a good 2 months before I moved in my new apartment. Now, my grandparents own 2 houses. The house that I grew up in is the house that all of my childhood memories are in. And even the memories of my aunt and doing all that stuff. But they have the house that they had their children grow up in. And so when my grandfather, that's when my sister was touched. And my grandmother was beaten too. He used to put his hands on her. But I didn't, after I would say like 7 or maybe like 8, we didn't go to that house. So not very often. And if I did, it was just to grab something, lock the door, go. And it's about maybe 30, 40 minutes from the downtown of Muskegon. So I hadn't been there. So when I first get back there, it's like memories just a plunger of memories just coming. And so, the hallway, I remember just sitting down one day and looking out at the hallway, and I remember my grandmother laying like in between the tile closet and like the bathroom door. Tailbone broken, eye black, arm broke. My sister is in the room. I remember my mom was gone. She was gone for maybe 30, 45 minutes. My granddad come in the room. He was drunk, really drunk. His his belt was a little undone. And I was on one side, my sister's on one side, my grandmother's in the middle. He touched me and she said, "We're not doing that anymore." And my grandmother said she's too young. And he said, "Well, she's not." They argue, slapped her. She tried to fight for us, but then he started to beat her brutally. And I remember him dragging her, and I remember when he did her arm like this, he broke her arm. I remember her just screaming, saying, "I can't take anymore, I can't take anymore." So he goes in. I'm standing watching him do this. My grandmother stays on the ground. He comes in the room. Me and my sister are in the room too. And yeah, he started to do some ungodly things. And I remember my mom ringing the doorbell. My grandmother can't get up, and she's moaning like, because, you know, and I'm telling her, mommy, I can't open the door. So she's telling me to, Tasia, you have to twist the knob. You gotta, and I'm like, finally get the doors open. So my mom sees her mom, and she said, "Mama, where is my baby?" And she said, I tried to save her. I tried to save her. And my mom goes to the room and bang on the door. And she said, "Dad, you can have me. Please give me my baby. You can have me." And he didn't want her, clearly. And when he came out the room, my mom went in the room and she was screaming. And it was blood everywhere. And yeah. So that leads to that moment in the kitchen. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I can see that you are in a lot of pain. You're hurting.
Yeah, more so just because now that I have kids that I love, my niece, my nephews, I could not imagine putting them through half of any of this. And I couldn't imagine staying around anyone who would want to hurt my kids. So my perspective has changed as far as me just being an individual young girl versus me being a grown woman with children that I care about and I love, and I know how far I'm willing to go. So when I think about them and what they've done, it's like, wow, that's where the pain comes in at, because it's like, where is it can't be any form of love here.
I called your mother.
You called my mom.
She hung up in my face.
She hung up in your face.
I called your aunt. She said you were out of your mind. I called your sister. While she wasn't able to confirm a lot of what you're saying, she did say your mother was pure hell. That led me to believe something happened.
For sure.
So while I can't necessarily argue the details of it, obviously I wasn't there. I know that something happened. I know that your story is important.
And I want to also say the reason why a lot of, like, me and my sister had to stay separated. They keep the kids separated. So you might not know what this kid is going through, or the only time I can say that I speak on things is if I've seen it with my own two eyes.
Right.
So I think that, like, with certain things, like with my aunt, that's something she's seen, or like, but my sister was passed out when he did that to my older sister. When we walked in the room, she wasn't like up and moving. She was out. I don't know if he hit her or what he did to her, because at one point I'm trying to, when I went to go open the door for my mom, when the doorbell was ringing, he shut the door and locked it. So that's when she came in. She wasn't able to get in, but when I initially went out, the door was wide open.
Well, here's the thing. If your story happened, I think it's important.
Absolutely.
If your story didn't happen, I think it's even more important. So for me, your life doesn't lose its importance.
Absolutely.
Your story doesn't lose its importance, irregardless of anything. I think there's something to be learned from this experience. I think there's something to draw from for other people with this experience, with your story, from your story. If you could go back in time and speak to the younger version of yourself, what would you say?
That's a good question. If I could go back to the younger version of myself, I would tell her to always hold her head high, never forget who she is, always love herself and put herself first, and to always use her voice, no matter if it offends anyone, because it may save her life.
Any regrets?
I think my biggest regret is leaving my two younger sisters. When my stepdad joined the military, I did go with my mom. I didn't want to go, but it didn't work out. And I think she was just trying to allow me to be with the people that I grew up with. But I didn't get along with my mom. Me or my sister did. My sister was already living with my grandmother. And I'm thinking he loved his kids. He doesn't have to care about me. He loved his kids. He loved my mom. Maybe he just wanted to be them. And I love my grandmother. So I felt like I can do that. But I don't trust that nothing has happened to them. Especially, I just don't. And even if it hasn't, like, the residual of the trauma that my mom, I didn't understand that she couldn't be a good mom to them. You got too much trauma and you're with someone who hurt your kids. So it's impossible to really love and be there for any kid that you have when you haven't really dealt with your own. You know what I mean? And then when the person who caused the trauma for you and your children is still in your house. So I think what kind of made him realize, hey, I have to start being a little nicer, is that when you have children, they follow their older siblings. What they see, they play together. When you're at work, they're watching them. So that's a bond that starts to grow. And regardless of how much you love your parents, if you know that your mother or father did that to your sibling, it's going to have an effect on you. And I think that he underestimated the effect that it would have on his kids. And I think that they all underestimated the effect that it would have on the next generation of cousins and, just family outside of what my grandfather and my grandmother created.
My name is Chris Styles. This is Trappin Anonymous.